Welcome to the last and final part of the Better Swimmer or Calmer Waters series. And this is titled Embrace the Shifts. We're going to be walking through what's occurred through us and in us in this journey. Years ago, there was, in our minivan, there was a broken hatch so that if I opened the back, I had to hold it on my back to keep it from shutting. And I was getting the bikes from my neighbor that we had hidden in his basement for the kids for Christmas. And the neighbor was like, "Man, you got to get that fixed. That's dangerous." I was like, "Yeah, I got an appointment to fix it." And I didn't. I just felt insecure that I hadn't got this problem attended to because I was in a place that I was managing every penny. Now, I'm telling this story to a group of pastors at a speaking event, and a pastor came up to me and literally had tears in his eyes because he was in one of these seasons where he was just at the bottom. And it was really embarrassing to him that the passenger car door in his car wouldn't work, and what it meant for his wife when they went somewhere, and just sucked, right? I get it. So I'm telling the guy that put this event together about the story that this other guy told me, this other pastor, and the guy that put the event together said, "Well, I wouldn't tolerate that. I just wouldn't tolerate that kind of circumstance in my life." Like you're going to go to Ethiopia and say, "Don't tolerate starvation." I've seen this tendency in spiritual leadership. I have also seen it over and over in company and corporate leadership. I was with a CEO I had worked with and coached, and this was in another chapter of his life. He had gotten the organization to a place of like 50 million in ARR, and the sale that occurred, because it was VC backed, meant that he and the other co-founder weren't getting anything, and the other employees that had sacrificed so much weren't either. And I still remember him saying this. He's like, "I couldn't step on throats to get what was mine." Now, he saw it as something that was broken in his character, like he should be more aggressive, when in reality it was a structural issue, which we got into in our conversation. But sadly, what happens in so many situations where there's choppy waters is we value what we think is character growth, but it's really character deficiency. I got to step on throats to get what's mine. I got to force and control circumstances. And we've seen over and over in this series, that's not what you do. You ride the Leviathan. You find the space where chaos and order meet, and you cooperate with what's unfolding to turn obstacles into opportunities. But the problem is this: when you walk through a teaching like this, if you're going to be a better swimmer in choppy waters, you just got to know most people are too passive. They're just too passive with their lives. So as a result of that, the yin yang, most business leadership is too active. A lot of preaching sometimes, even with the Bible, is grossly trying to condition something that's the opposite of the fruits of the Spirit. I don't want to be in a place that I am passively resigned, nor do I want to be in a place that I'm rigidly trying to over control. I want to learn what I learn in the moments where I'm becoming a better swimmer, to surf where the chaos becomes order through my gifts, skills, abilities, choices, character, circumstances, ways that I might even walk on water and see miracles happen. So I want to help you balance the active and the passive with this one last character, with this one last story in becoming a better swimmer. And to teach you about this character, I think first I want to read to you from a passage Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote about the men who wanted to be left alone. Catch this. "The most terrifying force of death comes from the hands of men who wanted to be left alone. They try so very hard to mind their own business and provide for themselves and those they love. They resist every impulse to fight back, knowing the forced and permanent change of life that will come from it. They know that the moment they fight back, their lives as they have lived them are over. The moment the men who wanted to be left alone are forced to fight back, it is a form of suicide. They are literally killing off who they used to be, which is why when forced to take up violence, these men who wanted to be left alone fight with unholy vengeance against those who murdered their former lives. They fight with raw hate and a drive that cannot be fathomed by those who are merely play acting at politics and terror. True terror will arrive at these people's door, and they will cry, scream, and beg for mercy, but it will fall upon the deaf ears of the men who just wanted to be left alone. And that, my friends, is best emulated in a character that we will introduce to you now called Gideon. Gideon. If I think about what 15 and represents for me, where I'm teaching leaders these kinds of stories, it represents the balance between not being too passive and too active. And on one hand, we've got Elijah as the patron saint of 15 and in a way of light. He's like all about being too active. We have Gideon, who's almost like the dark saint, who's hiding, who's too passive. He's just a man who wanted to be left alone. And when something gets awakened in him, something powerful happens, and he does do some missions with and for God, but he also does a lot of violence. So as we dive into this story, we catch up with Gideon because he's threshing at night. Now, what does that mean? They're trying to harvest their crops. Think about it this way. He's just trying to make his living. He's just trying to make an income. He's just trying to take care of people and feed himself and feed the people he loves. But they're under oppression. And because they're under oppression, they face this giant army. He's threshing at night. Now, the Bible gives us some other details. Like, he's in the least tribe, right? It's this tribe that only half of them went into the promised land. He's in the least clan. He's in the least family. He's like the runt of the runt of the runt of the runt of the runt. The least of the least of the least of the least of the least. And he's threshing at night. So where Elijah almost has too much confidence, we've got Gideon on the other extreme of things. He just wants to be left alone. And what's powerful is this. In his moments where he looks the most cowardly, he's visited by what we would think of like Jacob's story. It's the angel of the Lord. It would be Logos showing up before it came in human form as Jesus and says, "Hail, mighty warrior. Hail, mighty warrior." Whoa. What's happening in this story that's so powerful is Gideon is spoken to about who he is, even though his circumstances don't show it. Now, what he's asked to do in this story, in what occurs, is to help his people become free. And how are they going to become free? They're going to become free through what? Through dismantling the false center. That's what's happening in the Better Swimmer piece over and over and over. We've seen this in some of this series. So they have taken where you would build an altar to give your best to God and made it an idol so that it's to a false god. So anytime we have something in our lives that we give our best to it and it becomes the center of who we are not swimming with God for people. We are swimming for ourselves, for our own validation. That's what the nation of Israel was doing, and they're under all this oppression. They're hiding out in caves in this story, it says. They can't even live in their homes. So God's using Gideon, a person who is a man who wants to be left alone, who is in a world of being too passive when there's advice about being too active. And God sees him with his level 10 identity, even though Gideon is in a level 2 circumstance and he has a level 2 mindset. Right now, leaders that are watching this, you have a level 10 identity. God sees you for who you really are that needs to be materialized into your circumstances. We could say it like who you can become, but it's already in you. Hail, mighty warrior, level 10 identity. But you are in a level 2 circumstance. And what you want to be careful of when you're in that level 2 circumstance, whether you're like Gideon, a victim, or you have some ambitions, are they going to see me? Are they going to see what I can offer? Are they going to see what I can do? You do not have to generate your ambition or your identity. You want to be like Gideon, who's on the lookout for what you can receive from Logos, who you really are, what you are to do in the world. Hail, mighty warrior. The thing that you're most insecure about, the thing that you're most afraid of, the thing that you're most doubting about yourself. In this series of Better Swimmer, what is happening is you're learning that's really the truth of who you are. And when that shift occurs, when you understand that, you don't have to be this reluctant leader. Like Gideon, you can start to advance. Now, you're going to struggle and still have doubts. Gideon does that. He's constantly asking for confirmation and signs. I find myself doing that. I mean, like, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to advance the mission and I'm going to take the steps, but I still take them and I feel doubt. That's what we hit in session 1. It's normal to feel doubt. I want to commit to the action, even though I feel the doubt. As long as I have 51% faith greater than the doubt, that's all I'm looking to have happen. I 51% commit to the action, even though I have the doubts. And then I can move forward. Now, what happens to Gideon, sadly, is something that happens to people who want to be left alone. And rather than fully cooperating with the process of transformation and knowing his identity, he does get lost in the violence of it all. And that's the messy stories that we have in Scripture. In fact, we see that while Scripture tells us he lives a long life, he is unnecessarily brutal in his campaign to see the people become free. He does some violence he doesn't have to do. He overextends the mission. And I think what is the saddest of all is this. The thing that he was asked to do, to dismantle the idols, he ends up building his own idol. He let his own place that he met God and gave God his best, an altar, become an idol. The work of becoming a better swimmer in choppy waters is really never done. We want to stay vigilant for what our center is. Who are we swimming for? I am swimming with God and for people. If I start to do what I do for my own validation and not impact, the past places that God has worked in my life become the limiting factor to how God works in my life today. Because I go, well, that's how God worked yesterday, so surely that's what it has to be today. I can't think new thoughts about God. I can't experience new missions. I can't go through transformations. Like Elijah, I never go into the cave and know the sacred in a new way and know the new mission. I just say, no, this is how it is. What Gideon shows us as a story is that there can be a place that you come to, that you are in your reluctance living out the mission God has for you. You don't have to become unnecessarily brutal and you don't have to finish poorly. You can, in the midst of your choppy waters, find exactly what you need to live the shift that's occurred in you. Ride the Leviathan. Do what you've got to do. The power of you, the power you have, isn't to master the wind. It's to see within yourself the hard things that are there to see and bring those into making better relationships. In Gideon's reluctance, he is not able to be the blessing to his community he needs to be until he hears who he is. Hail, mighty warrior. The point of the affirmation of your identity in this process of becoming a better swimmer. The point of the signs you've asked God for, like Gideon, that God is with you in this process. The point of your bold acts, your feats of faith in the midst of all your struggles and insecurities, isn't so you can feel better about yourself. Direction always flows to community. And what Gideon missed in the finishing work of becoming a better swimmer is, as you're swimming in choppy waters, relationships and communities will always drift towards building idols. They'll always drift towards ideologies. It's why the culture of your team or your company or organization will always drift towards making something the center that is really false. It's your job as the Gideon to keep bringing them back to a fresh experience with who they are and who God is, even when you feel afraid. Hail, mighty warrior. Keep on swimming, whether the waters are calm or not. Peace.